My name is Harry Demopoulos. My first assignment is to invite Father Philemon here to give us the invocation and hear some thoughts from him. Father?
Thank you, Dr. Harry. And we ask that everybody please rise for the opening prayer. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Psalm 1. Blessed is the man who walks not in the counsel of the ungodly, nor stands in the path of sinners, nor sits in the seats of the scornful. But his delight is in the law of the Lord, and in his law he meditates day and night. He shall be like a tree planted by the rivers of water, that brings forth its fruit in season, whose leaf also shall not wither. And whatever he does shall prosper. The ungodly are not so, but are like the chaff which the wind drives away. Therefore the ungodly shall not stand in the judgment, nor sinners in the congregation of the righteous. For the Lord knows the way of the righteous, but the way of the ungodly shall perish. O heavenly King, Comforter, Spirit of truth, you who are present everywhere and fillest all things, treasury of blessings and giver of life, come and abide in us, cleanse us of all our stains, and save our souls, O gracious Lord. We pray, Lord, that you will continue to bless the Christian Rights and Freedom Institute, its members, its leaders, and that the voice and the message in our efforts to connect and educate and advocate will prosper. We ask this in your name, if you're holy and blessed to ages of ages. Amen. At this point, we'll offer the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. You may be seated. Just a few things to mention before we go into the overview of the Institute for the week. You may have seen on the back table these pins. We have our new Christian Rights and Freedom Institute pin. It's actually for the purpose of Christian relief, and it's a cross, and in the bottom corners there's the symbol, the Arabic symbol N, which ISIS was painting on the houses to say, these are the homes that are targeted for genocide. We're selling those for $5, and all of the funds are going to the IOCC, the International Orthodox Christian Charities, for the purpose of helping Christians who are suffering. And then finally, I was so happy to see, and I just never cease to amaze at all the wonderful things that our team keeps coming up with. It's a new Christian Rights and Freedom Institute bag, a handy tote, if you will. So there it is. And those are also available in the back. Now just to say a few words about the Institute itself. If you were to go to our website, the St. Catherine's website, you would find a short description of the Institute and its purpose. And it's just a nice, neat little summary. The Christian Rights and Freedom Institute exists to witness our faith by peacefully uplifting Christ against all forms of evil, tyranny, injustice, and moral decay afflicting our human race. Freedom is an inalienable right bestowed by our divine Creator upon all human beings. The foundation of all freedom is divine law, and as American citizens, our First Amendment freedoms include those rights of grievance, assembly, speech, press, and religious liberty. The latter being the highest of all of our freedoms because it allows us to freely express our conscience and to know and worship God from whom all freedoms stem. Therefore, we are morally obligated, and I would add, whether we are a believer or an unbeliever, we are morally obligated to defend the religious liberty of every person. Jesus is the light of the world. As his followers, we Christians are called to illumine and heal this fallen world. We understand that Jesus Christ is the divine Logos. He is, in fact, in the words of Justin Martyr from the first century, the spermatikos Logos, the seed of the Word. In other words, he's the source of every good and perfect gift, every positive thought, everything that is beautiful, which is from above. James 1:17. Wherever beauty, truth, and righteousness exist, we believe that he is present. We Americans live in an imperfect union. Our inalienable rights and freedoms are being eroded and abridged. We want them back. We can regain them by uplifting Christ. When they are restored, we will all benefit. Our first challenge as Christians is the transmission of faith in God to succeeding generations, and the education of our families on the sacredness of religious liberty as the public means by which we express our free will. Families are experiencing unprecedented social and economic pressures and are failing in this regard in many respects, thus diminishing the number of faithful Christians in our society. This trend must be reversed, and we are intending to play a role in that. The Christian Rights and Freedom Institute can play an important role in the education of our families on the foundations of their freedoms through our educational and advocacy programs, which are intended for use in homes, in our churches and halls and gatherings like this, and even in schools. In fact, freedom is so fundamental to everyone's well-being that Christians are, again, morally obligated to speak out on matters of religious liberty, on human rights, and on the pressing moral and ethical issues of our day. We must play a leading role in this process of education, and the Christian Rights and Freedom Institute is committed to this cause. We thank each of you for being here today, for being subscribers to the Institute, and for all that you're doing to help us succeed in this sacred mission. Thank you.
Thank you, Father, and let me summarize a couple of things that Father already alluded to, but it's important to repeat and remember. We are first a ministry of a Greek Orthodox metropolis of Atlanta, but founded here at St. Catherine in Naples. We are an inter-Christian, ecumenical, Orthodox, Catholic, Protestant, member-based educational and advocacy organization. We bear witness to our Judeo-Christian faith and values on the current moral and ethical challenges of our day. We defend universal human rights, religious liberty, and the Christian way of life. We witness our faith by peacefully uplifting Christ on issues such as human trafficking, sanctity of life, children's education, Islamic reform, secular and cultural challenges. And finally, we highlight the persecution, oppression, and genocide of Christians in Turkey, in the Middle East, and throughout the world, where there are about 60 countries in the world where Christians are being persecuted. Last year, the estimates were 100,000 Christians were killed. And so we try to operate in this environment. So now the best part of my standing here is to introduce you our next speaker, who is Richard Thompson, and he's the president of the Thomas More Law Center. Now, Dick spent 25 years of his professional career at the executive level of law enforcement. He was elected prosecuting attorney of Oakland County in Michigan. And for 8 years, he directed a staff of about 180 people, including more than 100 lawyers, and an administrative budget of $12 million. His accomplishments included successfully defending the constitutionality of Michigan's mandatory life law for major drug dealers in the United States Supreme Court, creating the first the state's first child sexual assault crimes unit and developing one of the nation's toughest no plea bargaining policies, which achieved a 98% conviction rate. He gained national prominence as prosecuting attorney for his uncompromising stand against Jack Kevorkian, despite public opinion in Michigan, which overwhelmingly supported Dr. Death and physician-assisted suicide. At the Thomas More Law Center, Richard Thompson directs a highly professional and aggressive team of lawyers dedicated to the defense and promotion of the religious liberty of Christians, time-honored family values, the sanctity of human life, a strong national defense, and an independent and sovereign United States of America. I also should mention that in his background, we have a very common background. His grandparents have suffered through the Armenian genocide. He lost a number of uncles. He comes from Asia Minor and Anatolia, just like half of our parish does. And so we have connections, spiritual connections with him in history. The title of his talk this afternoon will be Challenges in Assimilating Muslims into the U.S. Community and Culture. Ladies and gentlemen, my great pleasure it is to introduce to you Richard Thompson.
You may be wondering why I'm here this afternoon and not in the office doing the work of that I'm normally doing, and that is defending the religious freedom of Christians and a strong national defense. A few months ago, I got a call from Father, and after going through the normal pleasantries, he said, Mr. Thompson, do you believe in free speech? I said, of course I do. He said, how about giving one on January the 24th? Actually, I was pleased to leave Detroit to be here. You've got beautiful weather, and I know my wife was probably, when I get home, I'll tell her about the weather, and she'll be mad that I didn't bring her with me. I want to go back to 1816, when Thomas Jefferson wrote, "If a nation expects to be ignorant and free, it expects what never was and never will be." With Thomas Jefferson's admonition in mind, I want to thank the Christian Rights and Freedom Institute and the team that Harry's put together to sponsor these events, because it's important for Americans to know what is going on. And specifically to the talk that I'm going to give today, it's important to know what Islam is all about. The talk is about, the challenges of assimilating Muslims into the American community. The word assimilation was first mentioned by George Washington and many of his successors, where they said that the organizing principle of immigrants was assimilation. Assimilation these days is a dirty word. It's been replaced by multiculturalism. The word that used to bring Americans together, assimilation, is thought as politically incorrect, because what we now have is multiculturalism. Instead of celebrating our unity, we are celebrating our differences. And sadly, the government itself is promoting this because of the Civil Rights Act, where we have divided Caucasians and then the rest of the groups, the African Americans, the Hispanics, the Asians, the Native Americans. And so we've actually put this in our laws. So over the past several decades, starting in the 1960s, we have moved away from this traditional idea of America as being a melting pot, a unifying source, e pluribus unum, out of many one. We've moved to this idea that we are a hodgepodge of different nationalities and ethnic groups, and we want to keep it that way. Back in 1915, Woodrow Wilson made clear that America was not going to become a federation of nations. He said, and I'm quoting, "America does not consist of groups. A man who thinks of himself as belonging to a particular national group in America is not to become an American." And of course, Teddy Roosevelt wanted to do away with the hyphenated American. We are all Americans. And in fact, just this 2 years ago, when we were representing a coalition of black pastors challenging the law that was going to overturn the definition, the traditional definition of marriage, and I thought I was doing the right thing by referring to him and his group as African Americans. And he corrected me and said, "No, we're Americans." And too often, our media, you know, they says there's the Hispanic vote, there's there's the African American vote, there's the Asian vote. This changing us into various groups is really done for opportunistic politicians who want to keep us separate for their own purposes. This is what we have to keep in mind. The British author, G.K. Chesterton, put it, and I'm quoting him, "America is the only nation in the world that is founded on a creed. That creed is set forth with dogmatic and even theological lucidity in the Declaration of Independence." And I want you to keep his definition in your mind when we discuss Islam. We are a nation based upon the creed that is founded in our birth certificate, the Declaration of Independence. What I'd like to do now to put the rest of my talk into some context is to show you about a 10-minute video of a longer video that was prepared by the Dutch anti-Muslim Greek Wilders, which was banned by the Muslim community in all of the Muslim nations. But still, with that ban in place, we were able to get that video in play.
وأعدوا لهم ما استطعتم من قوة ومن رباط الخيل ترهبون به عدو الله وعدوكم وآخرين من دونهم
Second, please. I'm gonna die, aren't I? No. I'm gonna die. Ma'am, say your prayers. And we're gonna think positive because you gotta help each other get off the floor. Now, stay calm. You're doing a good job, ma'am. You're doing a good job.
It's so hot. I'm burning up.
والمشركين أعداءك أعداء الدين اللهم احصهم عددا وقتلهم بددا ولا تغادر منهم أحدا.
إن الذين كفروا بآياتنا سوف نصليهم نارا كلما نضجت جلودهم وبدلناهم جلودا غيرها ليذوقوا العذاب إن الله كان عزيزا حكيما.
لو أذن الله لنا يا أمة محمد سيقول حتى الحجر يا مسلم هذا يهودي خلفي تعال وقع رأسك ونحن نقطعها والله لا نقطعها أيها اليهود. الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر. الجهاد في سبيل الله الجهاد في سبيل الله الجهاد في سبيل الله محمد رسول الله. الله أكبر.
اسمك ايه؟
بسملة.
بسملة، عندك كام سنة؟
3 سنين ونص.
انت مسلمة؟ بسملة، انت تعرفي اليهود؟ بتحبيهم؟ لا ما بتحبيهمش ليه؟
كده
عشان هم ايه؟
هم قردة وخنازير.
عشان هم قردة وخنازير؟ مين قال عليهم كده؟
ربنا.
قال عليهم فين؟
القرآن.
فاليهود هم اليهود، هؤلاء هم الذين يجب أن يذبحوا.
فإذا لقيتم الذين كفروا فضرب الرقاب حتى إذا أثخنتموهم فشدوا الوثاق.
Nu, als door Allah getroffen neerstorten, nee, dat hoefde niet. Toen reden ze door, dat was allemaal verder best.
Maar je denkt niet dat er ooit een idioot opstaat die...
Nou, ik kan me niet voorstellen.
Je gelooft in de goedheid van de mens?
Nee, niet in de goedheid van de mens, in mijn eigen arrogantie. Dus dat heeft dermate veel uitstraling dat die kogel zal voor mij niet komen, denk ik hoor.
Ik zeg u, als ik de mogelijkheid had, ik zou vrijkomen. En ik had de mogelijkheid om het nog een keer te doen, wat ik op 2 november heb gedaan. Dan zeg ik, wallah, ik zou het precies hetzelfde hebben gedaan.
هذا ضد المحتل ويقدم بيوت ويقدم شباب ويقدم تضرب رقاب وتنسف جماجم. هذا خط النصر والشهاده القومي.
عبدنا امجدوا وتربصوا انا معكم متربصون والله غالب على امره ولكن اكثر الناس لا يعلمون.
ودوا لو تكفرون كما كفروا فتكونون سواء فلا تتخذوا منهم أولياء حتى يهاجروا في سبيل الله فإن تولوا فخذوهم وقتلوهم حيث وجدتموهم ولا تتخذوا منهم وليا ولا نصيرا.
مقدس است، بهترین دین است، در اسلام است. یک عیسوی معیشت بعد در نگاه اسلام بعد به اعدام محکوم میشه.
Islam is superior than the Jews, than the Christians, than the Buddhists, than the Hindus. The only deen Allah accepts is Al-Islam. And whoever seeks any other deen apart from Islam will never be accepted.
الأولين وقاتلوهم حتى لا تكون فتنة ويكون الدين كله لله.
دین اسلام دینی است که دنیا رو میخواد اداره کنه و اداره کرده و بالاخره اداره خواهد کرد.
ایام انقلاب ایام جهانی است، در جغرافیا و زمان محدود نمی شود. تردید نکنید که انشاءالله اسلام همه کجاها رو فتح خواهد کرد؟ همه قله های جهان رو فتح خواهد کرد.
قد حكمنا الدنيا وسيأتي يوم والله نحكم فيه كل الدنيا. سيأتي يوم نحكم فيه أمريكا، سيأتي يوم نحكم فيه بريطانيا ونحكم فيه كل العالم.
إن الله عز وجل أوجب علينا أن ننشر هذا الدين في الأرض كلها.
You will take over USA, you will take over UK, you will take over Europe, you will defeat them all, you will get victory, you will take over Egypt. We trust in Allah.
Ben yaparsam senin anan baban ve benim annem benim namusum eğer gidip o işi yapırsa bu namussuzluktur. Sen de öldürürsün. Mutlaka öldürürüm. Mutlaka.
يعني هولندا تبيح مثلا الزنا تبيح اللواط لكن أنا مش مجبر أن أمارس هذه الجرائم بالنسبة للإسلام يعني.
أن يكفروا بالأحزاب العلمانية والأفكار العلمانية والليبرالية والديمقراطية والاشتراكية ونحو ذلك من الأفكار البشرية.
إذا وقع الرجل في كبيرة الزنا والعياذ بالله بعد زواجه أو وقعت المرأة في كبيرة الزنا بعد زواجها فإنها ترجم حتى الموت.
apologize for some of that distortion in the the audio anyway. I wanted to give you an idea in the real politic. It's important to study the theology. It's important to study the differences between Islam and Christianity and the other religions. But in the real world, the real politic, this is what is happening. You will hear some statements from me this afternoon that are pretty hard statements, but I think they have to be made. Islam is like the Trojan horse, which we welcomed into the United States as another religion. It was disguised as a religion. Its ultimate objective, however, is political. Its ultimate objective is to destroy America and establish an Islamic nation under God and the Quran. So while Americans basically are asleep, faithful, zealous Muslims are awake and subverting the highest levels of our government, the military, law enforcement, both major political parties, public schools, universities, and financial institutions. As I said, Islam is more than a religion. It's a political ideology that regulates every aspect of human existence: personal, social, political, ethics, law, life, and the hereafter. It divides the world into two houses: Dar al-Islam, the House of Islam, which is made up of adherents to the Islamic religion, and Dar al-Harb, the House of War, which is made up of non-believers, infidels. Included among the infidels, of course, are Christians and Jews. According to the Quran and Islamic teaching, all people will one day accept Islam or submit to its rule. The Quran commands, quote, "Fight them until all opposition ends and all submit to Allah." Now, Islamic leaders, both political and religious, have been bragging for a long time that they will destroy America and Western civilization. Yet most of our political leaders are confused on how to handle this kind of rhetoric. And the reason for that is because religious freedom is one of our most sacred rights that we have in our Constitution and in society in general. So focus is always placed on the religious aspect of Islam, and we don't pay enough attention to the political aspect of Islam. And so America has failed to realistically deal with an existential threat that Islam poses to us. A good watchword is know your enemy. And I want to cite two generals in different eras who talked about that. In December 2005, four-star Marine General Peter Pace, then the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, gave a lecture at the National Defense University. He warned his audience, if we are to defeat Muslim extremists, it is important to, quote, understand the nature of the enemy, end quote. General Pace went on to reiterate a common observation of World War II. It could have been prevented and millions of lives saved if only Western leaders had taken more seriously what Hitler wrote in Mein Kampf and made in his speeches. So like Hitler, Muslim leaders are telling us what they're going to do, and yet we don't pay attention to it, or we're ignorant of what they're going to do. The other general I want to mention is a general who was also a member of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff in World War II, General George C. Marshall. In early 1942, just as the United States entered World War II, General Marshall decided that he wanted to explain to the American people why we fight. So he appointed one of Hollywood's great directors, Frank Capra, to produce a series on why we fight. And Capra went to General Marshall and asked for some advice. And this is what General Marshall said. He said, tell the truth, use their own words. Tell the truth, use their own words. And Capra, following that advice, won 11 Academy Awards for the series that he put on. So, in keeping with General Peter Pace and General Marshall, I would like to use Islam's own words, the Quran and Sharia law, and what the Islamic clerics have said to develop my thesis that Islam, Muslims, true believing Muslims, cannot assimilate into an American culture, period. It's a hard saying, but if you look at what the Quran says and what the Quran means to Muslims, if you look at what Sharia law says and what Sharia law means to Muslims, they cannot accept the various rights that have been given to Americans, rights created by our Creator, not by government, and the Constitution. Here's what some of the clerics of the so-called peaceful religion say. And you got a little graphic example of the peaceful religion. Islamic cleric, the Sheikh Omar Abdul Raham, the so-called blind sheikh. This is what he said, quote, dismember the American nation, tear them apart, destroy their embassies, shoot down their planes, kill them on land, at sea, and in the air, kill them wherever you find them, end quote. Abu Muhammad Madiski, a Palestinian theologian, said, Muslims must destroy those who follow democracy, and we must take their followers as enemies, hate them, and wage great jihad against them. A Taliban leader, Mullah Muhammad Omar, the real matter is the extinction of America, and God willing, it will fall to the ground, end quote. Then Ayatollah Khomeini, war is a blessing for the world and for every nation. It is Allah himself who commands men to wage war and kill, end quote. Then in 1995, Muslim Brotherhood Sheikh Yusuf al-Qawardi told a youth conference in Toledo, Ohio, quote, we will conquer Europe, we will conquer America, end quote. And of course, probably, how many of you have heard of CARE, the Council of American Islamic Relations? In 1998, Omar Ahmad, the co-founder of the Council of American Islamic Relations, said this to Muslims in California, and I quote, Islam isn't in America to be equal to any other faith, but to become dominant. The Quran should be the highest authority in America, and Islam the only accepted religion on earth. And today, anytime there is some kind of massacre, some terrorist activity, you will have CARE representatives on TV saying these are just outliers. You know, they have hijacked Islam. And then you have the Muslim Brotherhood. The Muslim Brotherhood, the largest organization of Muslims around the world, they're in almost 80 countries, and they control most of the major Islamic organizations in the United States and in the world. It is at its root a terrorist organization. In 2008, the Holy Land Foundation, a supposed Muslim charity, and 5 of its former organizers were found guilty by a federal jury of illegally funneling more than $12 million to the Palestinian terrorist group Hamas. One of the documents that was introduced at that trial explicitly expressed the Muslim Brotherhood's plan for the grand jihad in America. It was prepared by Mohammed Akram in May 1991 and entitled, quote, an explanatory memorandum on the general strategic goal for the group in North America. And here's a part of what it said. The Muslim Brotherhood must understand that their work in America is a kind of grand jihad in eliminating and destroying the Western civilization from within and sabotaging its miserable house by their hands and the hands of believers so that it is eliminated and Allah's religion is made victorious over all religions. See, they understand that if they confronted us in an active military campaign, they'd lose. So they're subverting our nation indirectly, year after year after year. And once they have sufficiently weakened our resolve to fight, that's when they will take over. The Quran is the Muslims' holy book. Okay? It's not like our Bible. One of the verses in the Quran says, quote, fight and kill the disbelievers wherever you find them, take them captive, harass them, lie in wait and ambush them using every stratagem of war, end quote. As I said, the Quran is the Muslim holy book. It's about as long as our New Testament. It comprises of 114 surahs, S-U-R-A-S, which are chapters. And it was started in about 610 AD in a cave in the city of Mecca, where Muhammad, according to the Islamic religion, received Allah's word from the archangel Gabriel. What you have to understand about the Quran is the words that were put into the Quran are not Muhammad's words, they are Allah's words, unalterable, perfect, unless, of course, Allah changes his mind, which he has done before. So according to the Islamic tradition, over a period of about 23 years, the Quran came down as a series of these revelations from God through the archangel and to Muhammad. And so you'll hear many of the apologists for Islam and many of Americans say, you know, Islam is a religion of peace. Every one of our presidents up till the new one, George Bush, Clinton, Obama, all have come out and said Islam is a religion of peace. Normally they say that after several people have been killed, and then they come out and say Islam is a religion of peace. So you have to understand now again that the Quran is the unalterable word of God, and the Quran has very little to do with peace. Okay, and I just want to read a couple of the quotes from the Quran so you get this idea. 9:5, fight and kill the disbelievers wherever you find them, take them captive, harass them, lie in wait, and ambush them using every stratagem of war. From the Quran, from God. So, next one. So fight them until there is no more fitna, that means disbelief for non-Muslims, and all submit to the religion of Allah alone. Quran 8:39. Next, fight those who do not believe until they all surrender, paying the protective tax in submission. And it goes on, I shall terrorize the infidels, so wound their bodies and incapacitate them because they oppose Allah and his apostle. So you have the Quran, the unalterable word of God, as the Muslims believe, telling the followers what to do. Now, besides the Quran, there is a series of hadiths or reports. These contain the stories about Muhammad. What Muhammad did and said was the sayings and actions of the perfect man. So when Muhammad entered into a marriage contract with a 9-year-old, Muslims could enter into marriage contracts with 9-year-olds. The other two concepts that you have to keep in mind when you're addressing Muslims are the concept of taqiyya and the principle of abrogation. Do any of you know what taqiyya means? Yes, okay. Taqiyya is a religious doctrine found in the Quran that allows Muslims to deliberately lie if, in their opinion, it is to protect or advance Islam. Therefore, a Muslim can say, Islam is a religion of peace, even though he knows that the Quran commands people to kill the non-believers. He can say Islam is a religion of peace. Also, it allows Muslims to pretend that they are following all the rules and regulations of the country they're in, because it's taqiyya, and he feels that this is a way to advance Islam at the end. The other principle that you should keep in mind is a principle of abrogation. And that means that verses that were revealed earlier in the life, chronologically, of Muhammad can be abrogated or canceled by later revelations by Allah through the angel Gabriel. And why they developed that principle of abrogation was that some of Muhammad's followers started to tell Muhammad, well, you know, what Allah is saying seems to be inconsistent in some ways. And that's when the principle of abrogation came in. It's found in the Quran. And they use that to at one point say, well, look, at the Quran says we endorse religious freedom. And there's a verse that sort of says that. But later on, there's another verse that says, kill the unbelievers. What the theory is that when Islam was still in a weakened state, when they didn't have all the power that they ultimately had, they came out and said, you know, we believe in religious freedom. As they gained more and more power, then the Quran became more and more militant as to what you could do with the people who do not believe in Islam. So, can Muslims assimilate? If they believe in the Quran, if they're faithful Muslims, and if they believe that you know, women's rights, women don't have as many rights as men do, if they believe that there is no such thing as religious freedom, if they believe that there is no such thing as free speech, if you speak against Allah or Islam, you can be killed. If they don't believe in a jury trial, as our Constitution has it, if they don't believe in the prevention of cruel and unusual punishment, where if you're a thief, your hand is cut off, where if you're an adulterer, you are stoned to death, how can they then say, I support the Constitution and human rights that the Declaration of Independence and our Constitution give? In my view, they cannot. Let me give you a couple of examples of what is happening here. Abdurraham al-Amudi conducted the Muslim Brotherhood's most successful infiltration of political and defense establishment thus far. This gentleman advised Presidents Clinton and Bush. He penetrated and compromised the military in both the Republican and Democratic Party. He established the Muslim chaplain program for the Defense Department, and he was the one that recruited Muslim chaplains, many of whom still hold their position, because he was the certifying authority for the chaplains in the military. Al-Moody appeared with President Bush at a press conference days after the 9/11 attacks. In 2005, the U.S. Treasury Department publicly admitted that al-Moody was a top al-Qaeda fundraiser in the United States, and he was sentenced to 23 years in prison. What about Major Nidal Hassan? American-born, became a Islamic fundamentalist. He went out and killed 13 of his fellow soldiers and wounded several dozen more. And when our government studied that particular incident, they didn't call it an act of terror. They called it workplace violence, okay? That's what the official report says. Never once do they mention terror. A 2007 intelligence report prepared by the NYPD highlighted that homegrown threat of Islamic terrorists. According to the report, quote, enclaves of ethnic populations that are largely Muslim often serve as ideological sanctuaries for the seeds of radical thought, end quote. The U.S. government report entitled the 2008 Interintelligence Committee on Terrorism concluded that Hezbollah, the Iranian and Lebanese-backed Islamic terror group, has former sleeper cells throughout the United States. This is the same group that bombed the Marine barracks in Beirut, killing 241 Marines. Al-Aqadi, an operative, infiltrated Congress through the Congressional Muslim Staffers Association. This group has been briefing Democrats and Republican congressional leaders that there is nothing violent about Islam. Immediately after 9/11, the congressional staffers began holding Friday afternoon prayer services on Capitol Hill. One of the participants was Anwar al-Qaidi, al-Laki, I'm pronouncing that right. Anyway, he was ultimately responsible for creation and recruiting of several terrorists, and we ultimately killed him in one of our drone attacks. But just days after the 9/11 attacks, he was feted to a luncheon at the Pentagon. Okay. Congress itself has been duped. Siraj Waji was the first Muslim cleric ever to deliver opening prayers to Congress. And if you remember, just a few days ago, there was a Muslim that gave the prayers, one of the prayers at the National Cathedral where Trump appeared. When Wahaj appeared before Congress, he asked the blessings of God upon the people and seeking righteousness and justice, okay? 2 years later, Wahaj was named as an unindicted co-conspirator in the 1993 World Trade Center. In one of his sermons, after he had appeared in front of the Congress with these prayers, he said, in time, this so-called democracy will crumble, and there will be nothing, and only one thing that will remain will be Islam. End quote. They've infiltrated our universities with millions of dollars given to universities like Cornell, MIT, Rutgers, Columbia, Princeton, Harvard. They've set up Middle East study programs. And guess the bent of these Middle East study programs? Anti-democracy, pro-Middle East, okay? One of the cases that the Thomas More Law Center got involved with in 2002 was a state case against the Byron Union School District, where 12-year-olds in the 7th grade history class were given a 2-week study course on Islam. This was the book that they were using, okay? In the book, they were told and I'm quoting from their workbook, "From the beginning, you and your classmates will become Muslims," end quote. They had to take on, and then they said, again, from the workbook, "Dressing as a Muslim and trying to be involved will increase your learning and enjoyment. Finally, trying your best at all tasks will guarantee you an excellent grade and a more enjoyable time." The students were given a list of Islamic names, and they were told to choose a name, an Islamic name. Girls had one list, the boys had another list, and then they put name tags on them with their name. They were also taught the 5 pillars of faith in Islam. They were taught how to pray in Islam. They were told that they should mimic fasting during Ramadan. Now, I will ask you, do you think that the school would have done the same thing for, let's say, Catholics or Protestants or Greek Orthodox? Would they say, okay, we want you to now learn some Greek Orthodox prayers, and we want you to take communion? Okay? It never would have happened. The ACLU would have been there, it would have stopped. Well, you know, when we filed a lawsuit, what the federal district court said, well, you know, they were not really teaching religion, they were teaching multiculturalism, and it's okay for them to do that. So you can see where there's this infiltration going on in the United States, which concerns me, and of course, the infiltration of Islam in Europe, which is going wild right now. One of the, if I can find it, one of the top cardinals in the Vatican says Islam wants to conquer the world and the West is letting it. This was Cardinal Raymond Burke. Okay, and he basically says the ultimate goal of Islam is world conquest, and the supine West is only helping it achieve that aim. And he said, it is clear that Muslims have as their ultimate goal conquest and power over the world. Islam, through Sharia, their law, will rule the world and permit violence against infidels, such as Christians. But if we find it hard to recognize this reality and to respond to the Christian faith, many people do not understand what Islam really is, he added. They create these slogans, we all believe in the same God, we all are united by love, and so forth. Christians, he goes on, Christians have neglected a fundamental truth. There is only one Savior of the world, Jesus Christ. We must not proselytize imposing Christianity, but if we believe in Jesus, it is our duty to bear witness, end quote. And there was another top bishop in Italy says, Europe will soon be Muslim because of our stupidity. And he says, this is Monsignor Carlo Liberati, Archbishop Emeritus of Pompeii, and he says, in 10 years we will all be Muslims because of our stupidity. Italy and Europe live in a pagan and atheistic way. They make laws that go against God, and they have traditions that are proper for paganism. All of this moral and religious decadence favors Islam. We have a weak Christian faith. The church nowadays does not work well, and seminaries are empty. The Archbishop went on, but you can see the problem that we're having, the problem that Western civilization has, the problem that America has, the last best hope for Western civilization. And we're allowing it to happen because we are ignorant to the real principles of Islam. We are ignorant of what the Quran teaches them. We are ignorant of the fact that many times these imams get up there and say Islam is a religion of peace, and we buy it without question. And so to answer the question that I was posed with, Islam cannot, or Muslims cannot assimilate in the United States, in our culture. Their religion prohibits it. The Constitution prohibits it, whether you're looking at free speech, freedom of religion, equal rights, and all the other basic human values that we support. And it's up to us, the American people, to stand up when our politicians are afraid to. Too often, we know what the right thing to do is, but we hide in the bushes because we don't want to be called bigoted, intolerant. So we allow the other side just to take over. There are times, and this is one of them, where Christians must show their colors. They must defend their faith. The more we back off, the more emboldened the other side gets. And that is a problem for our country. And I just go back to, I think it was 1789, when the Constitutional Convention was being held in Philadelphia. And there was a Mrs. Powell that was waiting to find out what was going to happen based on the secret convention that they had. And when she saw Benjamin Franklin open the door and come out, she approached Benjamin Franklin and said, "Well, what do we have, doctor? A republic or a monarch?" And Benjamin Franklin said, "A republic if you can keep it." And that's what we have. We have a democracy, a republic, but it is up to us to keep it. Too many people have died for this country over the years, from Valley Forge to now, for weak-kneed Christians to back away because they're afraid they're going to be called bigoted or intolerant. Thank you.
As I understand, you're going to be representing the Bernards Township Planning Committee in Bernards Township, New Jersey, one of these days soon. And, oh, I'm sorry. Oh, my name is Kirk Kilpatrick. And so the Town Planning Board rejected a application to build a mosque in Liberty Corner, and their rationale more or less had to do with zoning, parking, land use, that kind of thing. And my question is, do you think that's a good defense, or is it time to make the defense that perhaps Islam doesn't really qualify for some of the protections of the First Amendment because, as you said earlier, it's a political religion, it's a hybrid of religion and politics, and maybe it doesn't qualify for certain constitutional rights?
I'm aware of what is...
Some context to this question, because I'm not sure what he's talking about.
I think so. I'm aware of what is going on in Bernard Township. In fact, we're involved in it. Bernard Township is where this Muslim organization came in and wanted to build a mosque. And after 4 years of going through I think it was about 4 years, several years going through the whole procedure, they denied the permit to build a mosque, saying there was not enough parking, etc. And then they got sued by this Muslim organization, and it's right now in federal court. What our involvement is in this particular case, because the township has their own attorneys, several citizens appeared before the township board and opposed it. They were property owners, and they opposed it. Of the 12 or 13 citizens that opposed it, only one really spoke out against Islam. The rest of them spoke out, because their property values, because this was a residential area, they were concerned about parking, etc. What happened is they filed a lawsuit It's in federal court. And then the Department of Justice came in and started their own legal action and started to intimidate the people that had spoken out against the zoning issue. And right away, people started to back away. What we are doing, we represent, the Thomas More Law Center represents about, I think, 7 or 8 of those citizens who spoke out. Because what else happened was that the plaintiffs, in this case, the Muslim organizations, issued a subpoena against them, what we call a subpoena ducis tecum, saying, we want all your emails and we want all your contact information so we can determine whether you were engaged in a conspiracy to stop this, to stop the mosque. Now, what does that do? I can tell you a lot of people were afraid, and they're going to be afraid now for a long time to ever stand up in a township setting and oppose a mosque. Okay, that's how they intimidate people. It's called lawfare. If you speak out, you are in danger of being sued. Of course, you will be called a bigot and intolerant, but aside from that, you might be served with a subpoena saying, we want to know all your emails where you've discussed this, even with friends, and we want to know all your contacts with this. In the general question that you asked, there is a Religious Land Use Act that Congress passed that said that if a township is going to prohibit a church or religious institution from building, they have to be careful that it is not a discriminatory act. And so generally what happens is they claim, well, you allowed this Christian church to be built, how come you're not allowing us to have our mosque up? Now, what the Muslims do many times is they start an action when there aren't very few Muslims in this community, but they would say, we want to build a mosque. And it's basically extortion, because what will happen is they'll get a bunch of money and they'll get some free land to build a mosque someplace else. It's happened before. So it's almost like a legal extortion that goes on. The community that you're talking, I don't know if you're familiar with that community. The community you're talking about is really well, it's an upscale community, big lots, beautiful homes. The people that are opposing it are doing it for reasons that every landowner would use, not to have a facility that's going to bring in a lot of traffic. Keep in mind what the Turkish president said about mosques. They're bayonets in the sky. And that's just showing they're putting their flag in this place, they're putting their flag in this place, and then they'll bring the people in later on.
I'm next. Let's get back to Michigan. I lived in Oakland County in 9/11, and shortly afterwards, within 2 months, Christchurch Cranbrook and one of the mosques in Dearborn decided that we would have a peaceful time together. Now, this involved women. And the afternoon, which the first one was about 2 hours, and Christchurch Cranbrook hosted the Muslim women and their children, and it went very well, but they weren't the least bit interested nor asked a single question about our church and our approach to religion. Well, after that pleasant afternoon, we were asked down to the mosque in Dearborn, and my question's going to come after this. And we went into the mosque, and we had to dress. And actually, my picture was in the paper with me all wrapped up in one of those things, because it got a lot of publicity. And we weren't allowed in this empty room because it was some kind of holy place. And it went all right, and we were kind. But the thing that struck me about those Muslim women, they wanted us to learn all about their faith. but they weren't the least bit interested in hearing one iota about us. Now, I had a lot of friends who lived in Dearborn. They have all moved out. They had been used by the Muslim community. Let's take one of my real estate friends. As the Muslims were taking over Dearborn, she was a realtor, and she would take the girls, the women around to show them the houses and all, but when it came to buying the houses, they'd drop her like a hotcake, and then they have their own means of gaining money to buy their houses. So she was used by them, so all my friends have left Dearborn. And my question is, are there any Christians or Jews left in Dearborn?
Well, you know, we were involved in that fight as well, where, you know, there's a huge Muslim population. About a city of 90,000, there's about 30,000 Muslims. And if you go down into the city, the streets, you might as well be in Lebanon. They've got Arabic signs all over. Every year they'd have the International Arab Festival, and you'd have several Christian missionaries, normally young people, that would go into the festival and try to talk to the Muslims there. And the Muslims had security guards, and they kicked them out. The police came in and supported the security guards. An Arab Christian was on the sidewalks handing out pamphlets. I forgot which gospel it was. It might have been the Gospel of John. And I didn't bring the video, but we have video. Within 2 minutes of him being on the street, he was surrounded by 8 police officers, Dearborn police officers, and they took away his pamphlets, and they pushed them away off the streets. Now, constitutionally, sidewalks are traditional free speech zones. You are allowed to use the sidewalks for free speech. In Dearborn, you couldn't. We filed a lawsuit, and we ultimately won that because it was such a violation of the First Amendment right there. We represented Pastor Terry Jones from Florida. I don't know if you know him. He was the one that burned the Quran. Okay, he came into Dearborn, and before he got off the plane, and they arrested him. He hadn't said one word, he hadn't done anything, and they arrested him. We represented him. And ironically, the ACLU also said, hey, wait a minute, there's free speech. He hasn't done anything. What we did is we waited. They said, okay, we're going to put a peace bond on you so you don't get in any trouble. So the judge, trying to get himself or herself, I think it was a female judge, I'm not positive now, trying to soften everything, put a $1 peace bond on him. And he said, I'm not going to pay it. So he sat in jail for about an hour. There were photographs taken of him behind bars and then made public to the press. And right away it became, there's no free speech in the city of Dearborn. We won that case as well. But it shows you that they will go to extremes to shut down free speech. Now the other interesting thing is, stupid Christians, we want to build bridges to the Islamic society. Guess what? We build a bridge, they come over at us, okay? It is not a bridge of understanding. You think you could build that kind of bridge in Saudi Arabia or Turkey? No way. It's only when they're here in the United States that they say we want to have this dialogue, this bridge. We are so stupid, okay? So it's a bridge that we build, and then they come over. You know, for a while, do you remember hearing about this Chrislam, where in churches, Christian churches, they would put both the Bible and the Quran in the pews? I mean, how silly. How silly. Anyway.
I have 2 questions. The first one is, are there any Sharia law courts in the United States now?
That's a very good question. I don't know if there's any. I know they tried to start a couple. It got stopped in Texas, I think. Is there one in New York? Okay.
Oh, my God.
Okay, Sharia law. Now, you know, there was a case in Michigan where in a lower court, this couple got married, I think it was in India, they were Muslim, and then they came to the United States. Well, the guy got tired of his wife, so he went back to India and said, I divorce you, I divorce you, I divorce you. 3 times.
That's it.
And they were divorced. Then he came back into the United States, and he demanded custody of the children and property and all that. A lower court recognized Sharia law and said, well, they're divorced. But there was an appeal that went up to the appellate courts, and it was, the decision was overruled. But there's that danger that's going on. Now, what you have to understand, they'll say, well, the Catholic Church has canon law, okay? And that's what they'll say, well, the Catholic Church has canon law, but the Catholic Church's canon law only applies internally. It applies to Catholics. It's not the Catholic Church's canon law is now going to be the law of the country or of the state, where Sharia law is the law of the law of the government. Real Islam does not recognize separation of mosque and state. It's one. It's a caliphate. So with that, I don't know of any other, but I'm not surprised that Brooklyn would have one.
My second question is, after reading the book Twilight in America by the Christian Action Network, I was wondering about these terrorist camps all over the United States, and especially the one in Hancock, New York.
Okay, I just wanted to just add something briefly to the previous answer. A very, very important distinction between Sharia law and canon law is that in canon law, it does not apply to the non-believers, and there's no punitive thing. There are no death sentences. There's no lopping off of hands or any type of punishment. If there's anything that would be there, it could be more of a kind of therapeutic nature for a person to be healed of a sin. To pray or to fast or something to that effect. So please, yes.
Do you want me to repeat that question?
Again, please.
After reading the book Twilight in America by the Christian Action Network, which goes over all of these terrorist camps in the United States, I'm very concerned especially about the one in Hancock, New York. It seems to be that all these networks are all over the United States just waiting for someone to give them the word to start the next war.
I think that's a very legitimate concern. We have a camp in Michigan too, where it's closed out, and you can hear gunfire. They're practicing, etc., and it's all over the nation. Maybe I'm giving the FBI too much credit, but I assume the FBI is aware of it and is keeping track of it.
Well, that Hancock, New York one is main.
Okay.
Everybody should read the book Twilight in America.
Okay.
I've read that prisons are incubators for Islam, and since you were a prosecuting attorney, I was wondering, one, if you have any insight into that, and two, if that's true, how it can be stopped.
Well, I don't have real insight, but there is a lot of conversions of prisoners into Islam. There's a big effort to do that. Of course, Christians also have ministries in the prison system. I don't know how good they are, but chaplains are in the prison industries too, in the prisons as well. One of the differences is Islam is a pretty simple religion. You do the Shahida, there is one God, an Allah, and Prophet Muhammad is his messenger. You're basically converted into becoming a Muslim, and you learn the 5 pillars of faith, and you pray 5 times a day, maybe, and you're a Muslim. Very simple, whereas Christianity is much more nuanced. You go through RCA programs in the Catholic Church. I don't know, you probably go some program like that in the Greek Church if someone wants to convert to... We have a class called Embracing Orthodoxy. Okay. But there is, I've heard that there are a lot of conversions that go on in the prison. People become, Muslim.
I'll invoke Chairman's prerogative and ask a question, if I may. I see at high level two challenges with respect to this. One is the managing the immigration.
What is the what?
Managing immigration of Muslims. And second, of course, managing the 5 million Muslims relationship that currently live in the United States, the 5 million or so. So do you have any, from your work, any recommendations, suggestions of what we should do about either one of those challenges and how we should move forward and to deal with this difficult situation that you describe?
Interesting you asked that question. First of all, the Thomas More Law Center is representing the state of Tennessee, challenging the refugee resettlement program as unconstitutional. People don't realize that the federal government says we've got this great refugee program, okay, and we're bringing, as a matter of humanitarian beliefs, we're bringing these refugees in. The problem is the federal government isn't spending that much money on these refugees. The states are. Once the refugee comes in, guess what? They get Medicaid, they get all the benefits of the state, and the state has no choice in the matter. The state of Tennessee withdrew from the refugee resettlement program in 2008. So what the federal government did was say, we don't need the state. They just got a hold of Catholic Charities, which is a charitable organization, and say, you run the program. So Catholic Charities get so much money per immigrant that they bring in, okay, and in about 8 months, the immigrant is let free and now takes care of themselves through all the benefits that the state has to afford. And under one estimate, the state of Tennessee spends about $135 to $160 million a year on refugee resettlement. Okay, that's just the state of Tennessee. Even though they said we don't want a part of the program, once the federal government brings them in the state of Tennessee, then they become wards of the state. Of course, that's just that's a financial problem. The reason why we sued them is because we feel it violates the 10th Amendment, state sovereignty, that the state did not want these people there, but now the federal government brought them there, is forcing the state to pay for these people. It's commandeering state funds to run a federal program, and there's some law on that. Aside from the fact that there is a huge security issue, every one of the top intelligence and law enforcement officials say there is no way we can vet these people. They don't have the same kind of records that we do. Okay, they sell these passports, they sell these identifications, and we know ISIS is coming in through these sleeper cells. So it is not only a violation of the constitutional 10th Amendment, but it is also a danger to our nation. Once they get into a state, let's say Tennessee, they can go to any state they want. Okay, and one of the things that is preventing any assimilation is the fact that we herd them together. So if we bring all the Somalians together, they're not going to want to learn English. They'll just keep on speaking their native tongue. Okay? And that's what's happening. They are not being assimilated into our country. They are being kept in separate communities where you already know that in the Somalians, several of them have gone over to Syria and Iraq and fought for ISIS. So it's a stupid decision by a stupid political system. If you're really a humanitarian and you want to take care of them, why don't you take care of them in the Middle East? Why are you spending all the money bringing them here in the United States? One of the things we have to do, and we have to pay for it, is teach them English. Okay? We have to have special interpreters that go to school that will teach them English, and on all the other issues that we have. If you're a humanitarian, and I think Donald Trump has mentioned that, keep them in safe zones in the Middle East where they know the culture and where they someday will go back once it's all, once there's peace in the land there. So we don't, we make these stupid decisions. And of course, Catholic Charities and several, there are 9 organizations, they make a lot of money bringing refugees in. They want to bring as many refugees in as they can so they can get money for it, okay? They lobby for more refugees.
That's another good book, the Refugee Resettlement Book.
Okay.
One last question, if we may.
There's a bunch of people over there.
A bunch of people, okay.
Oh, no, on that side there.
Maybe I'll take 2 more. Because I know that gentleman over there. Okay, go ahead.
A great talk, sir.
Thank you.
At least the new administration, in the hubbub that's going on, has at least admitted that radical Islam, they can say it. When you look at radical Islam versus broader Islam, at least my interpretation of what you're saying is radical Islam is not a small part of Islam at all. Could you talk about whether there is any part of Islam that would be able to live in the West?
Well, first of all, you know, again, I said we twist ourselves into pretzels because it's a religion and we don't want to ever condemn a particular religion. So we start with saying radical Islam. But you know, we've changed that word around. Before it was Islamicists, then we use jihadists. We're trying to figure out how to go after the problem without attacking a religion. And I don't think you can. You know, Sun Tzu says you have to identify the enemy before you can destroy him. Now the point is are there peaceful Muslims? Sure, there are peaceful Muslims. There are Muslims who don't want to go to war, but that doesn't mean they're on your side. They're just not being aggressive. But let me tell you what happens. Let's say Muslims start attacking Christians. Do you think they're going to be supporting you? No, they found out in Syria, where they were living side to side peacefully. As soon as the ISIS came in, the Muslims pointed out the Christian families. Okay, if you read the book by Brigitte Gabriel, if you've read any of the books by her, she will talk about living peacefully side by side with Muslims during her young. While she was a young girl. As soon as the Muslims took over in her area, it all changed. So, are there moderate Muslims? Moderate Muslims are basically sloppy Muslims, okay? They know what is going to go on, and they're just watching. A moderate Muslim is one that has taken a tactical decision not to front themselves. But if they're a Muslim, then they believe in the Quran, and they believe in Sharia law, they believe in the unalterable word of Allah, they can't change that. And therefore, they're a danger. Now, the ones that are here in the United States, they're here in the United States. We give them all the rights and benefits that every other citizen gets. That's the way it is. But we certainly have a right to stop any others from coming. Non-citizens should be able, we can stop them. We have that right. It is not a matter of the Constitution, as some people say. We have a right to say who's going to come in and who is not going to come in if they're not already citizens of the United States. So I think that, again, that muddies up the water when you say, well, are there peaceful Muslims? Yes, they are. Are they a threat? Yes, they are. I don't think, I know you're going to have Josh, what's his name, Dr.
Zuhdi Jasser.
Okay. I know he's going to come off as a moderate Muslim, okay? I've debated moderate Muslims before, and one of the questions I ask, do you believe Osama bin Laden was a faithful Muslim? And they say yes. Okay. Do you believe in the Quran as the unalterable word of God? They say yes. They have to say yes. If they're a Muslim, they have to say yes. So you have a problem even with the people that are trying to say to you, we are going to reform Islam. Because, you know, as Christians, there was the Great Reformation, right? The Christian Reformation was totally different than what people like Jasser is going to say. The Christian Reformation was reforming the Christian church to bring it back to where it was before. There was, you know, corruption in the Catholic Church, and reform was to bring the people back to the Gospels. Reform in Islam would mean that we would bring Islam back to Muhammad, who was a commander that killed a lot of people. Okay, so this idea that there's going to be a reformation, I don't buy it. I don't buy it. You cannot reform Islam. You can transform it, but what person in the right mind think they're going to be able to transform Islam? They can't, unless you just throw the Quran away.
Last question, if I may, and sir.
A friend of mine recently got a phone call from his daughter who lives in Indiana, and he was told by his daughter that the children were sent home with a questionnaire, positive showing what the Sharia law is. Now my question is that legal for a teacher to do that?
Send a questionnaire home to do what?
For the children to answer the question with their parents about Sharia law.
Well, that's a hard question, because what we're dealing with is a school district and the court system, okay? We represent a family of a Marine who found out his daughter in 11th grade was doing these lesson plans and had to fill in the Shahida, and one of the questions was, Christians have less faith than Islam and all that. This Marine fought in the Iraq War. He said, you are not going to fill in that lesson plan. And he called the church, he called the school and read them the Riot Act. You know what happened? The school issued a no trespass order against him, that he could not come onto the school property. Okay, we are representing. That's John Kevin Wood. His daughter has since graduated, but you have the issues. There is the courts normally say we will defer to the Board of Education and the rules there, because the Board of Education are your elected officials. If you don't like what the Board of Education is doing, get them out of office. But there's a constitutional issue involved here as well, and that's why we're in the federal court, and that is establishment of a religion. Are they treating Sharia law the same way as they're treating Christianity? Are they sending students home with a lesson that says, oh, you know, this is what Christianity stands for, we want you to fill it out with your parents? If they are not being neutral, as the law now provides, and it would be a violation of the Constitution. The problem is, do they want to file a lawsuit in federal court against the school district, against the teacher, et cetera? And that's what you have. It's going on all over the country. You know, they have a day called the Hijab Day, where the little girls wear hijabs, Christian girls. Just try it out. And so you have these Christian girls, and they have photographs of them on the internet of trying out a hijab, different colors of hijab. And oh, my daughter looks really, really pretty in a hijab, okay? That's what's happening. They're slowly taking over.
Thank you very much. Please.
We can talk, you can talk.
Come.
Address the Muslim religion as a political movement versus a religious movement. And if that's the case, then they would be stripped of some of the laws that they carry through in order to get there.
Go ahead, give me a short answer.
Well, it's a very, I mean, I don't have an answer to that other than to say, once they're here and once they're American citizens, they're entitled to the full protection of the Constitution. Now, what you'd have to do is say, well, they are really not a religion, but a political ideology masquerading as a religion. a tough sell to the courts these days. What if fascism created itself as a religion, or Nazism created itself as a religion? Would we say, okay, we're going to leave you alone? Not at all. We'd probably, fight them, prevent them from taking over positions in our government. We haven't gotten to that point with Islam. So, it's a tough issue that we have to deal with.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it, and please rise for the closing prayer from Father. Father, would you give us the closing prayer, please?
Yes, in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, all Holy Trinity, have mercy on us. Lord, cleanse us from our stains. Master, pardon our iniquities. Holy One, visit and heal our infirmities for your name's sake. Lord, have mercy. Lord, have mercy. Lord, have mercy. We ask, Lord, that you would continue to bless our St. Catherine community, the work and ministry of the Christian Rights and Freedom Institute, its members, its leaders, its co-chairs. We thank you for the speakers we've been blessed to have with us, and we ask that you would continue to bless and watch over Richard Thompson in his work. We ask, Lord, that you be with us as we depart, and that you bless and watch over us for your holy and blessed 2 ages of ages. Amen. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much.